unfortunately are missing our current chair, Bapu Vaitla, but we are fortunate to have Josh Chapman from Davis and directors Angel Barajas and myself from Woodland.
David Moreno.
What did I say, baby?
Angel.
Isn't that silly? I apologize, David. Angel Barajas is not present. He's a non-voting member representing the county. Okay, and our participating agency is UC Davis Interim Representative Heather Davis, and I don't see Heather here at the moment either. But we do have a quorum with 3 voting members of the 4. So with that, we'll proceed to agency business and the oath of office for newly appointed director, David Moreno, for the City of Woodland. Has that been done?
So, David, if you would please say aye and state your name and then repeat after me.
Okay. I, David Moreno,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
That I will bear true faith and allegiance
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California,
to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservations
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Thank you.
You're also required to drink the water.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to item 2 on our agenda, which is approval of the agenda and the consent items. And the consent items are listed A through D: approval of the September 19 minutes, approval of the Treasurer's quarterly report for fourth quarter of 2024 and first and second quarters of 2025. First of all, does any director wish to discuss any of those consent calendar items?
No.
Thank you. Any expression of interest from members of the public?
I would like to comment that the treasurer's reports are not included,
Oh, they're not included.
not received.
So all we're approving is the minutes.
Correct.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
All right. Thank you. Motion and second to approve item 1A only on the consent agenda. Further discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion carries unanimously by those present. And this brings us to our public comment session, which by law we're required to invite any member of the public to address us on any topic not otherwise on the agenda at this time. Do we have any public comment, Madam Clerk?
None received.
Thank you. With that, we will conclude public comment and move on then to item 4. Item 4 is the Woodland-Davis Clean Water Agency General Manager Update and Operations Manager Update. That's going to be you, Mr. Tim Bush.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Tim Bush, General Manager for the agency. We have our usual topics, looking ahead for water supply outlook, how the winter is looking so far, update on long-term supplemental water supply, capital improvements, operations, and the electrical work that we've been working on last several months. So first, water supply outlook. Most of you have seen this graphic before. I'll explain it a little bit because we do have a new director. So this is the Northern Sierra 8-Station Index. This looks at basically the watersheds for the Sacramento River, kind of a cumulative fashion. So water year starts October 1. So the bottom, the horizontal axis is water years every day starting October 1. They update the graph. And then the vertical axis is cumulative rainfall or precipitation that comes in. The top of the shaded area is the 30-year running average from like 1990 through 2020. And then the different colored years, the red, the green, are very wet years. The brown and the black are very dry years. You can see we get a very wide range in precipitation every year. The dark blue line that ends in 26.4, that is where we are as of Tuesday this week. So right now we're trending a bit ahead of schedule. We're about 119% of average on Tuesday. I looked today, we're now down to 116% of average. So by the time it rains again, we will actually be below average. It's not expected to have any precipitation until end of the month and into February now. So we'll end up slightly below average soon. So hopefully that changes again for us soon. So right now it's looking okay. Look at two different reservoirs real quickly. So Lake Oroville is again north of us. The graphic is the same. So water year starts October 1, so the water supply starts October 1 every day going forward. Top of the shaded area is the average. The green and the blue lines on top are wet years, and the red line is dry year of record. The solid blue line again is where we are right now. Lake Oroville is actually doing really, really well. They are basically at their conservation pool, meaning that they have actually been doing flood releases the past couple of weeks. If you notice, the river has been high. It's going back down again now. But that's basically the maximum they can be at for this time of year. So Lake Oroville looks great. Lake Shasta, very much the same story. You can see the darker blue line. They did get into their conservation pool a bit and did release water to get back down. Lake Shasta is also doing very well for this time of year. Want to look real quickly at the snowpack in California. There's three different graphics. The top one is northern California. The middle one is central. The bottom one is south. It's a bit hard to read because it looks kind of squished. But the solid shaded area, the top of that is the average. The dark blue line again is where we are right now, and the other years are just different years. Northern California is a bit ahead of the average right now, but the kind of discouraging thing is it looks very similar to 2022, where we did get a good start, and then we got nothing January, February, and March. So hopefully that does not repeat. Central California is a bit below average right now, and Southern California is way below average for this time of year. Southern and Central don't really affect us a whole lot. It's really the northern Sierras that help us out with water supply. I want to touch base a little bit real quickly on long-term water supply. We have been, as you know, buying or transferring water on annual agreements with Salcedo Water District for a few years. 2 years ago, we did change the methodology. Initially, they were doing groundwater substitution, where they would transfer water to us, and in exchange, they would pump groundwater instead. That got us into a rather complicated permitting process with the State Water Resources Control Board, specifically related to a stream flow depletion factor, which is how much water you assume is lost to groundwater as the water moves from their reservoir down to us. The last 2 years, we did what was called reservoir reoperation agreement, which they state that they simply operate the reservoir differently to make water available for us. That does not trap us into a stream flow depletion factor and is a more straightforward path permit-wise. So now that we've successfully done that twice, we think we're in a position now that we can move to the long-term agreement.
David, do you understand everything he just said? Well, I don't. I don't. So if you don't, I think you need to say this all again.
Sure.
What are we talking about? The way they changed the manipulation of the reservoir, and what is it that they're doing that affects us?
Yeah, so it's more of a permitting question that the first 2 years, what we've been doing, short-term agreements with Salcedo Water District, they would make water available to us. The permit process was that they would make 2,000 acre-feet available to us. In exchange, they would pump 2,000 acre-feet of groundwater.
Okay.
And it was a fairly complicated permit process with the state. The state then says that you have to assume what they call a stream flow depletion factor.
A stream full of what?
Depletion.
What
So
depletion
basically,
of what? Water?
Yeah, so basically the water leaves the reservoir, goes into a river. Somebody else is pumping groundwater. Some of the groundwater they're pumping is assumed to come from that very same river.
Got it.
So you lose some of the water that's being transferred.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 7% loss, then 13. Lately they've been saying 25 to 50% loss, you have to assume, which then becomes really complicated. And
I thought our lawyer was supposed to take care of that.
Yeah, well, if we keep suing everybody, sure, but
Is this a public process that comes up with these percentages?
it is a public process that's ongoing. The hope is sometime this year or early next year, they will have a technical study that will look at this in depth. And that's the one thing, frankly, Director Stallard, that's been missing. The state just kind of reached into a hat and pulled out a number. So there is an ongoing process with the State Water Project and the Federal Central Valley Project to actually do a technical analysis and modeling to figure out what the stream flow depletions really are. Mm-hmm. But as Mr. Bush points out, this year, if you want to transfer water under the groundwater substitution rules, they're assessing, I believe it's a 20%. And they're saying if it's dry this year, it'll probably be 25% next year. So this change that
What I
Mr.
can
Bush is
understand-
talking about is
Yeah,
good.
what I can't understand is why in a dry year do they assume there's more loss from a water transfer than in a wet year?
What, you know, what the theory is that most streams are depleting. So you're actually, when you're pulling groundwater, you're actually pumping from the stream and pulling water out of the stream rather than from the groundwater aquifer.
Okay.
So that's the issue that they're trying to get at.
Okay, thank you. And back to you, Mr. Bush. So what are the implications for us? Because we rely on them as our backup water supply.
Yeah, so what we've done the last 2 years is a different approach. It was permitted under reservoir reoperation, which really means that they simply operate the reservoir differently to make the water available to us. That is not subject to the stream flow depletion factor.
Oh.
So we have a cleaner path forward because they're not relying on pumping groundwater instead. So we wanted to try that out a few years to see how does that work permit-wise. It was successful twice. So we're thinking now that we're in a position that we can go ahead with a long-term agreement with Southside Water District under the reservoir reoperation permitting program rather than groundwater substitution.
So we have a problem, but we have a fix for the problem, is what you're saying.
That's what we're trying. Yes, hopefully yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the plan is that we were working towards a long-term agreement, probably 10 years minimum, maybe option for 20. We'll work that out basically to continue the 2,000 acre-feet for winter, but then also give us the option for summer water transfers. Because when there's a Shasta critical year, we do need to transfer some additional water to help get us through the summer months.
So our proposal is to buy an option for water, whether we use it or not.
Yes. Yep. With a long-term agreement, it does require a more in-depth CEQA analysis. So it's a fairly long process. We want to get that started really in the next month or so, roughly.
And how long-term are we talking again?
Probably at least 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
It's
I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, thank you. It's a fairly involved process environmentally to get environmental documentation done. So that's why we'd want to do a longer agreement. It buys both of us certainty. Soulsetter is very much interested. We're very much interested. It gives both of us certainty and water supply going forward.
Okay. When will we be considering that agreement? I don't see it on today's agenda.
No, it'll probably be at least 6 months out.
Thank you.
It'll take quite some time to get the framework of agreement. We would essentially use what we already have. And just make the duration much longer. And then there's some language we will need to add in because of pricing of water varies a lot year to year, and even season to season, that we will have to work in language on how do you handle variable pricing in a long-term agreement. And that's not unique, it's been done before, so we can come up with language to make that work for everybody.
Thank you. Do you have more to proceed?
I just had one thing to add, not to belabor things, but this change from stream flow depletion, groundwater substitution to reservoir reop, it should bring a smile to the politician's face because you're saving money. Well, one of the big things was
Who's
to
seeing
get the
the money?
2,000.
You mean they're seeing the money because we're buying it, right?
You're saving your ratepayers money.
Oh, okay.
I mean, when you wanted a net 2,000 acre feet under the original transfer arrangement, you had to buy 13% more water to yield that 2,000. Now it's 1 for 1, so you're only paying for what
So
you
the
get.
state can claim 50% and it isn't going to hurt us, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
Whatever percentage they come up with doesn't matter because we've used a different strategy.
Yep.
I appreciate
Yeah,
the-
and the reservoir fills every year at South Sutter. They have more water coming into that reservoir than anywhere else in the state.
Thank you. Please continue if you have more, Tim.
Good. That's all on that topic. If there's any more questions.
Anybody else have a question? Okay.
And with that, I will turn it over to Stan to talk about capital improvements and then onward.
All right. Stan Gritchko, Operations Manager. So thank you, Tim. So a few updates. At the joint intake, so capital improvements, joint intake, we did, as previously approved, conduct some erosion control repairs. We do have some cleanup there to do. There was a little more erosion From some of the rains, the water actually came down from the top from the parking lot and created some runoff there that created a little bit of erosion that we'll have cleaned up. And then we're still working with Jacob's team on safe roof access and access for our screen cleaning and maintenance ongoing. That's still a challenge for the team to get out there and do those efforts. The Whopper meter at the intake has been replaced, previously approved by the board. This is our main power meter for the facility. Previously, you might remember from the previous action, there was one meter that we would have to go through a pretty convoluted exercise to separate between us and the reclamation district. This meter installation that was completed will make that much easier for us. Ongoing to have that power separated. There's one or two smaller items that will still be jointly done, but the calculation became much easier with that new install.
Now, RD 238 uses a whole lot more electricity than we do, don't they?
They absolutely do, yes. Yeah.
So having separate meters is the way to keep the sheets real clean here.
It makes the spreadsheets pretty. I mean, it would take Michelle a few hours to get through all the spreadsheet manipulation to make sure that the power is done right. And WAPA's not the easiest anyway. PG&E, you get a bill, you use this much, here's your distribution, you're done. WAPA, three months after the fact, you're having to redo some of those calculations. So.
Work on estimates then, and then you.
A little bit. They send you the billing, and then, but it's almost like a true up afterwards because they don't have some of their calculations till afterwards. So.
By the way, this is a good time to say congratulations to the staff on completing the WAPA power agreement and bringing their much cheaper power to our operation, and those savings numbers. That'll bring smiles to all of us. Thank you.
And then out at the plant, obviously working with Jacobs on a number of different smaller capital improvements there. And then at this time, from a cost perspective, as far as cost sharing with any of those improvements, obviously as we get further along, we'd bring those back to you to have a discussion. Operations update. So December, you can see the average we used there, a little over 11 million gallons between the partners. Certainly meeting all contractual requirements and regulatory requirements as normal. The water quality reports as usual posted. And then we are under our Term 91 normal primary water right. Term 91 is not in effect, hasn't been in effect. So, okay. There it is, the new slide. So just as an FYI, so we do have American Water Infrastructure Act, Risk and Resilience Assessment and Emergency Response. 5 years ago, we conducted our first one. This is basically looking at natural and man-made hazards to the facility and to our infrastructure. It's a pretty involved process. We use West Yost as a consultant to walk through that. Takes a number of months, number of meetings, both with us and with the Jacobs team. I should mention, virtually everyone you see in the front, everyone you see in the front row here is from Jacobs. They're here for an item later in the agenda to have a discussion and tell you more about themselves. Anyway, so we're wrapping up every 5 years. You have to update that. So we've been working on that as well. So we're doing that. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then the watershed sanitary surveys and every 5-year commitment that we join, we partner with other agencies. And that's basically looking at the river, what constituents are in the river. We're required to sample and report those back to the state. We do that as a group effort with Sacramento, West Sacramento, a number of other agencies along the river that use that as their water source. Electrical updates, as you're aware, we've had some challenges in that arena. Working with Jacobs, certainly still investigating the August 2024 incident that occurred. Some of the challenges we've seen there was trying to work with and coordinate with PG&E for some of the testing that Jacobs has had to perform on some of the equipment. Requires PG&E to actually be disconnected from the facility, and that's been a struggle, as you might know. Coordinating with PG&E and get them to come out and do some of that presents some challenges. So that's why we've had a number of months there where we're still waiting on some information.
Do we now have 2 backup generators?
No, we only have the 1 backup generator. We had another one brought in. Jacobs had another one brought in when we didn't have PG&E as a primary source for about a month. Yeah. But right now, we'd have PG as the primary source and then a backup generator for that.
Is PG&E still involved even with WAPA?
PG&E provides the distribution, so they provide the power to us. So the lines and all of the equipment coming up and into the plant is PG&E's.
WAPA is only at the river?
WAPA is generation only. So WAPA generates through hydroelectric or other means, right? And then it basically would feed into PG&E's distribution network, and then we get it. You're wheeling it just like Valley Clean Energy. Yep, just like that. And then with the generator we were running, obviously the Air Quality Management District, we did exceed our permitted allotment for hours per year. They did send us a notice of violation. We did respond. Have not heard back yet, to my knowledge. Yeah, so we may or may not hear back, but it was more about notification and cleaning up when we notify them, which we've worked with Jacobs to square away that from a process perspective. We're only permitted for up to 200 hours per year under emergency basis, and we exceeded that.
Are they going to fine us, or do you know?
There's the potential they could. We're kind of waiting on that. We did respond, and the interesting piece is, part of their main challenge with us was they indicated we had not notified them that we were on generator for any length of time, and then come to find out we actually had, just not that same individual within the office. So they may be taking that as a contributing factor, and maybe we won't end up seeing a fine from that effort. So next. Oh, we're on there. Okay. As a follow-up, a little bit of follow-up to the electrical system investigation that Jacobs is doing. Obviously, we're moving forward with the Distributed Energy Resource Project. We're pretty much at the stage now where we're going to set up a meeting with the Jacobs team and their electrical folks, and then hope to move that even further along to where we can get into final design. As you know, we did submit for one grant that was denied. That was a pre-application, pre-design. We are still waiting to hear back on the larger grant application for the $3.5 million. And then I already covered that. And then obviously, if there's any additional grant funding or other funding opportunities out there, we'll certainly seek those before we look to go back and fund the project through our normal rate base. I will say on this, a lot of the electrical investigation that Jacobs is performing now, we do anticipate that if there are any recommendations or whatever recommendations come out of that, we would look to hopefully incorporate into the DER project. So that we're touching the electrical system one time. Because the DER project is certainly going to have a number of facets of the existing electrical that it's going to have to integrate with. So we're hoping to combine those, and then the end result is we have a lot more reliable, a lot more resilient power supply for the facility and then for the communities, obviously, at that point too. And I'm happy to take any questions.
He's the Public Works Director for Davis, and this is our collaboration with the Woodland guy, acting as general manager, and a Davis top staffer doing the operations. Okay. It's very incestuous here. All right. And now we're going to move along then, if there are no questions. Any member of the public wish to ask a question? All right, if there are none, we're going to move along to item 5, which is the 2024-25 mid-year budget update. And seeing as how we didn't get the 3 of the quarterly accountings, I presume we're going to hear about those now, right?
Not about those.
Well, you want to tell us what the problem is?
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that later. No, there's not a serious problem. But overall, the budget is looking really good. It's somehow surprising to me. We're already halfway through the fiscal year. So the agency approved a $23.02 million budget June of last year. It used to be split 50-50, but as we go more years into operations, the operational side is becoming larger than the debt service side. So about $12.3 million operations, $10.6 million debt service. One thing I would like to note is that on the Woodland side of the debt service, Woodland had been funding a reserve account for the first 10 years. We've actually completed that now. So going forward in the budget, we will not be, there's like $600 and some thousand per year Woodland was paying. That's ending as of this current budget. So that will go down a little bit.
Are you talking about creating reserves?
We already have, we're not going to send that to reserves. We already have it. The next budget will just simply have a reduced spending on Woodland side. The reserve account was, it was a condition of the SRF funding agreement that we had to fund, I think it's like the last payment up
And you
front.
might define SRF for our new member.
Yeah, SRF is the state revolving fund. So the water treatment plant and all the facilities, both the city's local facilities as well, was all funded through a combination of the Clean Water SRF fund and the Safe Drinking Water SRF fund. We were able to obtain 100% state funding at a very low interest rate. Woodland's loan is 20 years at 1.78%, and Davis's loan is 30 years, I think 1.9. So it's far below market interest rate. By far the best way to fund large projects such as this one. So we have to pay that off. Woodland side over 20 years, Davis side over 30 years. And Davis had funded their reserve payment up front. Woodland did not do that, so Woodland paid it over 10 years. So we just finished that. The reserve account. The SRF says you have to pay some dollar amount up front, and Davis did that, and Woodland did not.
Okay, but after 10 years, we've now completed that obligation.
Yep.
Okay.
So there'll be a slight reduction of Woodland's debt service beginning next budget cycle.
What year of operation are we now in, Tim?
We're in the 9th year.
That's very good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Surprised it's already 9 years, but it is. So the mid-year budget looks at our actual expenses through end of November, what we think we're spending through December, and then what we think we'll be at through the end of the fiscal year at the end of June. Overall, we're doing very well. It's all decreases. I think we're projecting being roughly $1.5 million or so under budget at the end of the year. One of the bigger ticket items is the fixed O&M portion of the contract. We're looking at probably being 7,000 under. That's essentially zero, given how much that budget item is. But the next two fairly large ones are electricity and pass-through chemicals. When we do the budget in June, we kind of do a projection, and it's intentionally conservative for how much we will spend on electricity and pass-through chemicals throughout the fiscal year. We do not want to be underfunded with that. That's how we make sure we have enough water for the partners. So we do kind of guess at that, and it is conservative. Pass-through chemicals are kind of a term we use. There are some chemicals that are included in the Jacobs operation contracts and certain ones that we pay directly. The ones that we pay directly are the chemicals used for the individual water quality parameters that the city wants, like chlorine, and Woodland and Davis can both be different in those regards as well. It's sodium bisulfate, chlorine, and phosphate, orthophosphate. Orthophosphate's anti-corrosive that we add. The cities are a bit different on how much we inject. Same thing with chlorine, they're a little bit different between the cities.
I'm not understanding, are we using less chemicals because we're delivering less water? Why does the $100,000, is that more cost?
We're using less because we're using a bit less water than what we projected to use at the beginning of June.
So is that 100,000 a savings or an additional?
It's a saving. It's a savings.
Thank
so
you.
about
See, I didn't
600,000
get that.
savings, electricity, 100,000 in chemical. I would caveat the chemical though. We can no longer get annual contracts for chemicals or for pricing. We can only do that quarterly. So the chemical suppliers are now saying that every quarter we can give you a different price.
Is this because the prices are so variable or
Yes.
changing too quickly?
They're variable.
Okay.
We are saving money on supplemental water purchase because we are not in Term 91 curtailment, do not expect to be, so that money we will simply not use this year. Next slide, please. The other significant budget increases or decreases include cost savings on the joint intake erosion control project. That was, we had budgeted for the agency to lead design and construction. We led design, RD 2035 led construction, so we had budget authority to do the project ourselves with RD 2035 reimbursement. We did it the other way around, so they led the work, we're paying 20%. So it shows as a budget savings, although we would have been reimbursed most of that money anyway, so it's kind of not truly a decrease in agency cost. The other item, the $375,000 for water rights environmental documentation, That we will do, but it's going to be a bit later. We won't finish that this fiscal year. We'll start this fiscal year and finish in the next one. And at this time, we're not looking at anything that we can think of that would increase our budget. So overall, we're in excellent shape.
So our fish screens repair is completed.
Yes,
No further financial obligation from us, right?
correct.
The erosion control project is completed, no further financial obligation from us.
It is completed. We have to do a little bit of erosion repair work.
From the
that-
parking lot?
Yeah, from the parking lot, and the river came up above the rock a few weeks after it was installed. So we'll pay for part of that, but we're paying 20%, and it's only going to be like
All right.
a couple $1,000s maybe.
And
It's
so
not much.
our generator problem is resolved at this point?
Yes. Well, that'll be coming up soon, but it's resolved, but we're still working on investigation.
I'm trying to figure out what problems we have left now that
Yeah.
you've
So,
fixed most of them.
so,
That's next. That's next item.
so on the electrical, there will be recommendations for electrical changes. Yeah, and that'll certainly be a discussion from a financial perspective, a discussion with Jacobs. And so I do anticipate there will be some costs that we'll be bringing back for discussion with you there. But that won't be, it's not going to be next meeting. So it's down the road a bit because we don't actually have the information from the testing yet to understand what changes we'd need to make the PG&E coming in more reliable.
And did you say that the roof access problem had been resolved too?
They're still looking at it, that we kind of switched up. We had a design to put in a ladder and safe access. And then the team kind of said, well, we can actually potentially access that with simply a scissor lift, a mobile scissor lift. So they're investigating that. So it'd actually be a simpler and more cost effective and could be used in other areas as well, right? So, yeah.
Thank you.
Plus, scissor lifts are a lot more fun than stairs.
Correct. Yes,
Come on.
I think
You
we get a
drive that
nod
thing
back here.
around,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
come on.
absolutely.
These guys want to ride around
Yeah,
on a scissor
roll
lift,
around,
right? I mean,
yeah.
come on. And then the investigation that you're talking about, is that purely just into how we can be more efficient? Or is it, receiving the power from PG&E, but there was also investigations into what happened to the equipment when it all,
Yeah,
when,
so-
what do you call it, when the surges happened? Are those running in parallel, or what's going on with the
No, so-
surge situation?
So there's two, so the two projects I talked about, the DER is in response to some of the challenges we've had, but that's really augmenting and increasing the sustainability, the reliability of the facility. The investigation that's occurring is about forensically looking at, we had this issue with PG&E of a certain type, right, with the power surge. It created some downstream issues on our equipment. There's been a number of highly invasive testing that's been completed from an electrical perspective. That's not been completed yet, again, because of the challenges of PG&E. So it's about making sure we're resilient on that piece too. So there's going to be two components. One is that's the first one. And then what we are talking about with Jacobs as well is looking at overall the entire electrical system there, because we've had other challenges that weren't related to PG&E. So that's the next piece, is looking at that as well. But that's also after. The main priority is we want to make sure the generator will come on if PG&E goes out, right? That's the bottom line. So that's the main focus right now. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good conclusion. Thank you.
Any questions on budget?
Well, when are we going to see the quarterly?
Yeah, we will discuss that with the treasurer and find out when we will be getting those reports.
All right. So let's see, that concludes then item 5.
So item 5, item 6, I wanted to bring this up to the board's attention. This will be an agenda item at the April meeting, but it is a fairly substantial change to our water rights and the way that we have been operating since day one, along with everybody else in the Sacramento River watershed. So I think you're all aware, the last several years, the salmon in the Sacramento River have not been doing very well. There's been a lot of warm weather events that wiped out a lot of fish and a lot of other things. The state is also working on an update to the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, which kind of governs operations in the Delta. We've heard at previous board meetings how the State Water Resources Control Board is wanting to do what they call unimpaired flows, where they would want 55% or greater of all the water in the Sac River watershed to go right out to the ocean. And the better plan to that is the Healthy Rivers alternative, Healthy Rivers and Landscapes alternative, which is what the Sacramento River water users, including our group, Bureau of Reclamation, DWR, have all been working on. So there's an agreement that was prepared, was actually signed on Monday. We are part of a group called the Sacramento River Settlement Contractors Corporation. They're kind of like the umbrella organization for everyone who has a Sacramento River settlement contract, of which there's about 2.1 million acre-feet total in the state. They signed that agreement on Monday with the Bureau of Reclamation. It provides funding to the contract holders, and it does change our contract a bit. So at the April board meeting, it will come to our board to consider that agreement. They signed it on behalf of all the water users. There was a bit of urgency to get this over the finish line before January 20th, because there is a change coming to the federal government on the 20th that may or may not honor things in the work for the past couple of years. The funding that is coming to the water users is coming from the Inflation Reduction Act, which may or may not be usable after next week. So they got the agreement done and over the finish line on Monday. That was in NACWA's newsletter that came out on Tuesday this week, so it is public now. This has been worked on kind of intentionally, like on the sidelines a little bit, not super public. So, but first, want to walk through our agency's own water rights and how this affects our water rights and how it all ties together with everything, especially since we have a new director today.
Present here, I think it'd be helpful if you reviewed what Term 91 is and what a Shasta critical year is and how it impacts us.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the agency holds two water rights. Our primary water right, the water that we use every day, is the State Water Resources Control Board water right. It is a very junior water right. It was assigned in 1994. Water rights, the State Water Board water rights are on a seniority basis. Ours is, I think, the youngest, so we get cut first. That water right is also subject to a Term 91 curtailment, which is a typical summertime curtailment. Happens probably 9 out of 10 years, roughly. Term 91 is triggered generally when reservoir releases are required to meet certain delta water quality objectives. Basically, they look at flows and whether or not it's natural inflow to the Sacramento River and Delta, or are they releasing reservoir water to make that work. It is most certainly not an exact science. There is a graph that is updated every day on the flows, but it doesn't always follow the flows. There's a lot of other unknown factors that work into that. So typically it's in effect.
How come Term 91 is in effect in January?
It is not right now.
All right. I thought it was. Right.
It has been, yeah. It has been in the fact. This year it's not. They ended it actually early this year. They ended it in early September this year.
Oh, so it has not been effective through the winter.
Correct, yeah.
I must have misread something you sent, sorry.
It could be. I could have said, I might have forgotten not, I don't know, in something, but yeah, so the length that it goes into effect varies very much every year, and why they ended it early this year I couldn't even explain, but they did. And but it has gone year-round before. In 2013-14, it did go year-round at that drought. And in several years since we've been in operation, it has gone all the way to Christmas, which is why or close to Christmas, which is why we do a water transfer agreement for winter now. So that's normal. Historically, it had been 3 to 4 months in summer, but now it seems like it's getting longer each year. Because that's a normal curtailment, we also that's why we have the Sacramento River Settlement Contract water right. It is a Central Valley Project water right. It's a contract with the Bureau of Reclamation. We own 10,000 acre-feet. That water right is restricted to use between April 1 and October 31 every year, which just happens to fit the normal Term 91 curtailment duration. That water right is subject right now to a 25% cut in what's declared Shasta critical year. So Shasta critical year happens when Lake Shasta does not receive enough inflow. It's based on inflow to Lake Shasta that it has to get over, and it's not the same amount every year. Sometimes it's 3 million, sometimes 3.2 million, sometimes higher if I'm kind of stating that correctly. It's not exactly always the same number. It kind of depends what happens the prior year as well. So Lake Shasta has to achieve a certain amount of inflow. They have to have what they call full natural flow. They project it to the next fiscal year start. So whenever Lake Shasta doesn't have enough water coming into it, our water supply can get cut 25%. That had always been the case until 2022. When in 2022, we could see the trend already starting in January that there was only 1 million or so acre-feet in Shasta entirely. all those Sac River settlement contracts are around 2.1 million acre feet. As we get into February and March, there was still only 1 million acre feet in Shasta. Everyone saw this coming. Reclamation cut our water supply by 82%. We lost 8,200 acre feet of our summer water supply, which coincidentally always happens when term 91 is on a longer duration because it always happens during a drought. So we ended up transferring 7,300 acre feet of water to make up for most of what we had lost. That cost us a lot of money that year. So the drought protection agreement, which was signed on Monday, does a couple different things. It helps protect us against the future 82% cut. We are obligated to give up a few things, which I'll get into in a little bit. But it does also help to, next slide, please. It does also work to help salmon. One of the problems that salmon have in the Sacramento River is temperature, especially when Lake Shasta gets too low that they can't maintain enough cold water for egg hatching, or I'm not a salmon expert, but basically little salmons. And so this is a look at what actually happened in 2013 through 2015 drought. The black line is the actual, and then the yellowish line above that is what it would be with the agreement in place. Essentially, what happens is that there would be more water preserved in Lake Shasta to help maintain a cold water pool for the salmon, and also give us regulatory certainty that we would not be cut by more than 50% ever again. And so basically it looks like, yeah, with this agreement in place, that drought would have been much better for everyone, for the salmon and for water users. So that's kind of the overall goal. It does work in very, very well with the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes Agreement. One of the things that the State Water Board is looking for, since the Sac River Settlement Contractors is a large water user as a whole, how are we going to manage water use in the river collectively for the benefit of the environment? And getting that contract in place first helps a lot with that approach. So next slide, please. So how it looks to be shaping up is that looking at the last 100 years of water, rainfall into the Sacramento watershed, roughly 30% of years are wet. The next 32% are roughly a little bit below or a little bit above normal. 22% dry, and then 16% of years, so 1 in every 7 or 8 years is critical, would be a Shasta critical year. What the agreement does is it adds another tier into the Shasta critical year category, which allows reclamation to cut our water supply to 50% in those 7% of years. So they're looking at the 100-year average. It would be roughly every 14 years or so. Instead of a 25% cut, we would receive a 50% cut. In exchange for that, they are providing funding. There is funding available to the agency for that.
But you mentioned earlier at one point we'd been cut 82%, so that won't happen anymore under this agreement.
Correct. So, yeah, what would happen is in these 7% of years, the water users, our whole Sac River Contractors group, would give up 500,000 acre feet for the environment, either staying in Shasta or feeding salmon, and then we would take a cut, a deeper cut in our water supply in 7% of years. The caveat to that is, though, over the past 100 years, it would have happened 7 times. 4 of them are in the last 10. So we've been in a couple long droughts in the last 10 years. What that means going forward, if I'm pessimistic, I'm going to say it's going to be more than 7% of years going forward. But we really don't know. But that's the approach. Reclamation is providing funding for this. I think it is by far the best option that we have. When the agreement comes to the board for approval in April, over the next couple of months, they're working through the agreement's been signed by the corporation. Over the next couple of months, they're working to get all the agencies to sign on to it. This will be very much a carrot and stick approach. This is the carrot. The stick is going to be, they haven't worked out exactly the details yet, but it's going to be more akin to if people don't sign on to or agencies don't sign on to this agreement, they have to act as though unimpaired flows are in effect.
They have to do what?
They have to act as though the unimpaired flows are in fact, essentially giving up 55% or greater of their water supply.
So they'll still be subject to more than 50% reduction in these critical times.
They will be subject to that every year.
Every year?
Yes.
Well, it sounds to me like the shotgun is being held to the head here.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yeah, the unimpaired flows approach is it's such a detrimental thing to every water user in Northern California. It's almost so bad it's hard to even say out loud. It seems that it can't be real, how bad it is, but
And how much, you said it was 250 million?
yes.
And then what's our cut on that?
We're in line for roughly 1.1 million of that. It's based on our percentage of ownership over the overall water. Half of that has to be spent on water resiliency and other type of projects.
And what does that look like for us? I'm just curious. What's an example of a water resiliency project that we would undertake?
That we haven't really quite worked out yet. The challenge for us is that we're pretty new.
Right.
For a lot of water, especially the agricultural users, they can line a canal, they can replace leaky gates. We don't quite have that situation, so we're going to have to come up with that over the next few months.
What can the other 50% be used for?
It's just simply funding the risk that we're taking on by 7% or so of years we take a cut.
Okay.
Would water use reduction strategies qualify for resiliency funding?
We will have to look into that.
You know, because we can encourage more drought-tolerant landscape. Of course, the problem, is if we reduce our demand too much, our fixed costs don't go down, right?
Correct, yeah.
Our loan obligations stay where they are.
Yep. Yeah, so we're working on that now. This just came about rather quickly because I wanted to get it done before January 20th. And then the details on what happens if you don't do the agreement are coming. What exactly qualifies for the 50% of projects is coming in the next few months. So I wanted to bring the board's attention to get input from you, get you thinking about it. I did include a kind of a 7-page handout on the overall approach, kind of at a high level. And Josh is here today to help answer questions as well on this. It's kind of the first change in decades on the water rights that we hold.
So when this comes back to us, the action we would need as a board to agree that we're going to sign on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the master agreement's already been signed with reclamation by the corporation, and then each water user will have to sign on to it over the next few months.
Tentatively, we can expect this to be a staff recommendation, though.
Yes. Yeah, this is by far the best, if not only, option we have.
The least bad or the best.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Board members, questions? Okay. So we'll be hearing more about that, obviously. All right. If that completes item 6, we'll move to item 7, which is Jacob's presentation on the fiscal year 24 annual report. Who's going to give us that? Oh, got the shirt that says Jacob's on it. That must be you. Yeah, your name, please.
Facility.
Thank you for coming today, Ken.
Thank you for having me.
When the red light around the neck is on, the mic is live.
Looks like it's working. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start with a round of introductions since I do have a lot of people here supporting me. From left to right here, we have Ben Silva, who is the operations supervisor. He's directly under me, runs the plant day to day for the most part.
Thank you, Vince.
Next to him is Howard Bruin, who is the California Director of Operations. Next to him is Stephen French, who is the Southern California Manager of Operations.
He wants to fight fires. He needs water, right?
Yeah, that's why he's up here.
All right.
And then lastly is Sunshine Smith, who is the Northern Cal representative, who works directly with me in support of the plant.
Welcome to you all. Thank you for coming. Thanks for sitting through the rest of it while you wait for your turn.
Yeah. Go ahead and go to the next. So we're starting our first slide here with a focus on safety because that's a primary priority of Jacobs. Without that, we can't get the rest of the job done. And the 918 days represents over 2.5 years without any recordable incidences. We've only had a couple very minor ones anyway in the nearly 10 years that we've been in operations. And to accommodate that or to accomplish that, you can see on the right a list of some of the trainings that we undergo. And those are typically held by professionals that come in out from the outside that would train firefighters or other high-risk groups. So we've got professional safety training. And then every day we'll have a tailgate meeting, go over the job for the day, and then also discuss pre-task plans specifically to whatever we might be working on.
May I ask, Vince, how long have you been in charge of operations?
About 2 years.
Yes.
So you get 2/3 of the credit for that, then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you see the direct improvement once he got involved, right? Yeah. Go ahead and switch that. So I've already mentioned some of the people that are on that list. That's our org chart. At the top is Howard. Below that is Sunshine. And then myself, to the right of me is Trey Kane. He is our, I think Northern California, right? Or California? California safety rep. We work with him very closely. We invite him on site quite often, not only in response to anything we might have a concern with, but proactively to look over things that we might be having to deal with. It's a very safe plant as it is. A lot of contingencies built in, but for an abundance of caution, we're very proactive there. And as needed, we'll bring in expert groups to help facilitate any operations we're doing there. The org chart, nope, that's all right. I do want to say that what you're looking at there, the majority is on-site staff near the bottom. But as you can see, the support I have here today, Jacobs, while you guys might interact and the agency might interact with some of the on-site people on a day-to-day, we have a global support team behind us. And some of the things that Stan mentioned and that I'll mention in my report too, when we run into something that's a little more outside of the normal day-to-day operations, it's not a challenge for us to work through. We have experts that specialize in these different areas and fields that we can call on. So that gives us a strength that a lot of other places don't have.
So is Benjamin Silva still involved? That's me.
Yeah.
I thought it was Vince.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, Benjamin.
Benjamin.
Yeah, Ben.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
I like Vince, though.
You can call him Vince if you like, though.
Yeah.
Can't see the show without
Yeah.
the program.
Change your name.
All right.
Okay, next slide. So this is an annual overview of our flows for the contract year 08, which is July 23 through June 24. And we just wanted to give this as a representation of the comparison of, to the left there it says Woodquo raw water flow. That's the diversions from the river of 6,688 million gallons. And then across, you'll see the totals for the diversions to Woodland-Davis and UC Davis. The percentage is also below that. But the thing that I want to point out is of the 6,688 million gallons we took from the river, we deliver over 99% of that. So we have a very, very, what am I trying to say? Efficient, yes.
The state
process.
should hire you.
No, thank you.
I mean, if they're talking about losing 50% of the water we transfer, they need some help.
That's why we're doing what we do, yeah. And it's a testament to the design of the plant that allows for that. Next slide. This is just a graphical representation of what I just went over, and you can see the peaks on the two ends of the summer of July and then into the summer of June 24. It's pretty obvious, right, that you're going to see lower flows during the winter, but just a graphical representation to give some perspective.
I like the way the chart is headed downhill.
Yeah. This is a 3D model, yeah.
It's a unique
Okay. Next. So our plant is, we operate primarily under the state of California regulations, but then in addition to that, our contract delineates a more stringent standards that we have to adhere to in regards to water quality. And so that requires an extra effort on the staff on site. And we take special care in making sure those people are trained up and the equipment is operational in that regard. It's recognized that they're asking a lot of us, the agency is, and that we have, in the total nearly 10 years of operations, never exceeded those expectations. Or maybe that's the wrong way to say it, but we've maintained as good or better of what's expected of
never
us.
exceeded.
Yeah, never. And part of that, if you notice there at the bottom, we do employ a number of people from Woodland itself. And so there's kind of a community pride that goes along with what they do, is they're interacting with their neighbors. And I'll tell you from firsthand experience with those people that I work with, that's part of what draws them to what we do, where we do it. They could go, their skill set would allow them to go other places, but they like the fact that they go to some place that is contributing to their community. So a little pride that's involved in that also. Next.
I mean,
Please.
remember this project won a national award as the best project in the country from the engineer group. And so we've always been pleased with what has been done there, and your company and your predecessor company, CH2M Hill, I mean, deserve immense credit for all that too. I've often wondered how you felt about the design, build, operate strategy, which was what we put in place at the beginning of this. Are you still happy with what has happened in the consequence of being in that relationship?
I'm fairly new to it. I wasn't here when it was under construction, designed and built.
I didn't see much scar tissue over there, Ken.
I know. Yeah, I'm fresh to it. But I take immense pride in the fact that our company has been involved from start to finish here, right? And whether it's outside people, engineering-wise, other treatment plant individuals that come and see this place, we never receive anything but high praise of how it's run, how it's designed. They are blown away by the technology that's employed there, the competency of the staff. So I would have to say that from my experience, it's been nothing but fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just-
And I give Tim and Stan probably more credit than they deserve as far as their involvement. Whenever we give a tour or something, I heap praise on it.
We have to keep those guys humble, you know what I mean?
But I can see from my standpoint the appreciation that went into the years prior to this thing going online, and the effort it took, and the forethought, and you can see it in their discussions and the continued involvement. So, yeah, it's a wonderful collaboration. I think so.
Well, I'm glad, and that's what we certainly want.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you all.
Not at all. So perfect timing, because now we're going to talk about some challenges. Now, Stan touched on a few of these
I think
earlier.
we're going to adjourn.
Yes. When you're running an operation of this size and this complexity, it's not going to be 100% all the time. You're going to have some challenges that come up. And I think that's part of the reason why Jacobs has been involved with this, is it takes that aspect out of the cities having to do some of this work. Stan touched on earlier about the roof access. That's been an ongoing thing that we are trying to correct, and we do have some remedies in progress, so I won't go over that. He discussed that already. Sedimentation pumps out there also. Sedimentation pumps that keep the intake clean. It's part of the design to pull some of the river sand in for part of the process and keep that area clean. And that's going through a complete renovation and reconditioning of those pumps right now. Pump lubrication, initially it was facilitated via seal water from an on-site well, and that was, we felt it was too risky to have that, because something can damage that well, and then that would affect our pump. So we've transferred over to all drip oilers. And then the fish screens, of course, that was touched on earlier, and that has been completed. All the fish screens have been replaced. The fish screen cleaner itself has been rebuilt, reconditioned. We're looking at improvement. Well, we did make some improvements on that system also, but also how to do a better job of maintaining it. That was not a design of Jacobs or CH2M. That was another company. Forgive me for not knowing all the details there, but we took that on as part of the process, and now as we move forward, we're trying to find areas to improve and correct what we, were handed over to.
Yeah, I would say as a reminder, the joint intake was not built. It was a separate project to build the joint intake. It wasn't part of the water facility project. So it got to a certain point of completion, and then there was an arrangement with, at the time, CH, but now Jacobs, to take over and complete that design and then take over operation. They initiated that project. Yeah, they were the lead on that. And then ultimately the agency got it over the finish line. Yeah.
So that was a discussion on the intake. Now, as far as the water treatment plant itself goes, we touched on the power disruptions a bit earlier. That's an ongoing remedy. As far as where we're at now, it's a huge undertaking, and we've employed our experts and outside agencies or vendors to look into it. And as Stan mentioned, we'll expect some reports here. I think we have another round of maintenance and testing scheduled for the 31st if PG&E cooperates. And then hopefully that will allow us to complete that aspect of it and provide a report. Part of that report is if we can count on the generator's start. And so far, everything I've seen indicates that that's not an issue. The runoff events. So a challenge of any plant is going to be when the turbidity and TOCs in the river go up. And
Total organic carbon.
Total organic,
It's organics in the water.
right.
Total organic carbon.
Thank you. I just feel like it's always good for us to know what the acronyms mean.
yes. We take it for granted sometimes when we spew them out. So we're allowed some relief when things get excessive just because of demands on the plant, whether that's increased reimbursements or downtime or something, because it's recognized that at some point you just can't treat the water. Or let's say that's an assumption. We have never had to ask for those reliefs, even though we've experienced extremely high runoff events with both turbidity and TOCs, and we've never gone offline because of it. And I've talked to West Sac. That plant's been in operations many years longer than us, and they've had more difficulties in operating during similar conditions. So another point of pride for us and a testament to the plant.
So you have to filter out all that turbidity.
Yes.
And what, when it gets to the plant, right?
Yes.
So you have screens and things that,
Yeah, the process in brief is that it gets pumped from the river, and then chemicals are added, coagulants are added, and then it goes through a sandblasting clarification process, which is a rapid way to get that.
so the coagulants grab the organic
Yes.
material and pull it out.
And so at some point, there's a possibility or potential that turbidity coming in could overwhelm that process.
Yeah.
And you would just slow down, maybe to a point where you have to stop. Well, we've never had to. Under Ben's operational leadership, that plant has ran. I don't even know if we've ever had to slow down because of it. I don't think so.
So it settles out of the water, and do we skim the bottom then to get that stuff out?
There's two processes as it's going through. First, when it settles, the heavier stuff will settle. There's recirculation pumps that will put that out into our gravity thickeners, and then that gets pumped out to the drying beds. Anything that makes it past that goes into the filtration. We want to get as much out as we can pre-filters, otherwise the filters would load up quickly.
Just curious, are there any heavy metals in this waste?
I would have to get back to you on the specifics on that
Just
report.
curious.
Yeah.
You don't know. It's okay.
There's quite a bit in there, but the specifics are not, yeah.
I guess what I'm
Not
wondering
detailed.
is what are we creating on the long term over in the settling basin?
No, that's fine. I mean, primarily it's silt, sand, and those things
Would assume
that's in
that
there.
too.
Yeah, and I would say we've produced Woodqua in collaboration with Jacobs has produced a video of all of these processes that will be on our website soon. We'll be sure to send it your way.
You know, I have all those hours between midnight and dawn just going to waste. I want to watch those videos. Thank you.
I think that about covers it. Anything we want to add to that?
Only that, this is possible because of a team of people who take pride, initiative, and forethought. Treatment is something, it's like a train track. Once the train is on the rails, it's going where it's going, and you hope you make the right decisions early on when a storm is happening, if something is happening, because you're looking at days of trying to correct a minor issue.
Thank you. Are we being recorded, this meeting? Yeah. You have to actually speak at the microphone.
I'm sorry.
Otherwise, it isn't going to be on the record. Okay.
I just know he takes such pride in it. I thought I'd
Yeah.
give him a chance to.
Sure.
Next. So again, as far as the joint efforts go, I touched a little bit earlier on the project staff, but as you can see that I have here and the experts that I mentioned earlier, we have a very deep bench, Jacobs does. And Stan touched on some of the projects that we're working on together. And that's only possible because we can reach into what Jacobs has to offer. We had a filter media assessment in our maintenance repair and replacement program. I think it was scheduled for year 7 to pull the media out and have it replaced. Due to the skill of the operations, we were able to test that media and find that it barely had any ill effects, so we saved money on that. We didn't have to replace it. All our infrastructure is in good shape. And we did that via Jacobs experts who were able to come in and run these extensive tests and provide a very detailed report on it. Regional support for asset condition. We just recently went through an extremely comprehensive inspection of the entire plant and all the assets there. And I think there was only a couple things that there were any concerns about, and those were minor, and they were repaired, as it was discovered. And that was performed by our regional maintenance team that came in, a group of guys, and not only were they able to do the work, but they provide the expertise and detailed reports. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about there. Skipped ahead there. It was a predictive maintenance, and so we've got good data on that of where everything stands. Go ahead, next. Design team is what Stan mentioned as far as the DER. We're still moving forward on the collaboration as far as the improvements to the electrical system. Next. And I would say our crowning achievement so far right now, as maybe the last 6 months or a year been, we've had Palantir, which is an AI company, working closely with us on our treatment process to help optimize the usage of chemicals and the actual coagulation process at the plant. And our intent is to go beyond that into other areas of the plant once we've got data on this. And this is something very unique, I think, to water treatment. I would say we're on the cutting edge, and what we're learning at our project specifically will be carried over to other Jacobs projects. But this isn't something you're going to see at other cities or any municipalities. This is something special that we're able to provide. And with that, do you have any questions? That's it for me as far as these details go.
I think I've only asked about 20 questions, so I had my quota.
You've had yours?
Yeah, it's got a quick question. As we kind of coming up on the, we're coming up on the 10-year mark. Are there like larger CIP projects that we're looking at that, I mean, you talk about the screens and they don't need it. Are there other issues or parts of that plant that we know are going to have to be circulated out or fixed that's kind of like a larger budget hit? I obviously know, we're anticipating those and I imagine the money is there, but is there something like that that's coming up that we're...
I would say, if you want, Ken, I'll tell.
Yes, please.
Yeah, and certainly chime in if you want. So the repair and replacement fund we're pre-funding a lot of those larger replacement efforts. But as an example, with the filter project, the filter media was part of that. But through testing, we realized we didn't have to do that. We can push that cost off and not have to do that right now. So. Ken and Ben and the team do a lot of that with that. We see next year we have X, Y, and Z coming up to be replaced. They'll look at it, look at the repair history, has it been reliable, and then we'd reassess that. So there are a number of those things, large pumps, those types of things that'll wear out, right? That would be there, but we assess those as we go. And they're part of the funding of that would be part of the normal budget process. We'd identify those things and call them out.
Stan, is there any evidence of deterioration of the concrete infrastructure in this thing? Because we have so much water moving by it all the time.
Not that I'm aware of. I think the only thing we had was in the sand ballast area, there might have been some challenges with some of that. Is that correct, or am I?
I don't recall anything too extensive. No,
Okay.
No.
Yeah, that'd be the only area, because obviously you have a lot of grit, other material moving through there, so that might do it. But the water itself, all the concrete surfaces have been fine. Wastewater, different story. Water, not so much.
And then one last question. Where do you hub, like, where's all the IT stuff on your chart? I didn't see anything around, like, information security or IT working. You hear about, like, plants and things like that being targeted in different ways, in terms of IT attacks. And so, like, on that flow chart, that wasn't up there. Where is that? Just another operation Jacobs houses somewhere else?
Yeah,
How is that all protected?
We are going over, looking at any vulnerabilities of that right now. We just sat through the AWIA workshops, a number of sessions there, and I brought in our IT OT guy. And currently, we're above expectations as far as the way we run things. But one of the things that he recommended just a couple days ago to me was the possibility of putting some additional servers on site for backup. And then he's also was updating our firewall, I think, recently, because there are these malicious attacks that are just constantly going on. They don't affect us. We don't notice it, but it's being monitored by our team, and then they will come to me and recommend those.
And it's being monitored elsewhere, not at this facility. It's a larger Jacobs operation. Okay.
I would simply, just not to belabor, but I would echo Ken when he's saying the agency is, and Jacobs in particular with their cybersecurity at the facility, are well ahead of the game from an assessment perspective. So very, very strong on the cybersecurity front.
Does Michelle get to go in? Do you get to go in? Do they trust you to get into the?
Yeah, I get to go in the gate, yeah.
All right,
But I
all
couldn't
right.
get their PowerPoint today.
Okay. All right. Well, honestly, it's very nice that you've come today, Ken.
my pleasure.
And brought your team. We really appreciate working with you. And I think we might have more questions.
Joint question. You're going to wrap. I just had a question that I just wanted to say thank you to you and your team. And just really acknowledge. I went out when I was first elected 4 years ago. One of the first things Stan set up was a tour to this plant, and I was absolutely amazed by the work that happens there. Like when you're elected official, someone told me who before, it's like, everyone thinks it's kind of this great job, whatever, and it's the non-sexy things, that the water's clean, the trash gets taken out, right? Like in your cities, that those happen. When you turn the faucet on, you get clean water and you can drink it. And it's really amazing to me. This project 10 years ago was a huge undertaking across the board, and has been such a benefit. And I think one of the kind of crowning jewels of collaboration and work that our two cities have done together. And I really appreciate, when you serve on a board like this, aside from a few small things, we don't really ever hear from you guys, right? Because of how smooth this runs and the work that you guys do. So thank you for your continued work and your continued pride in serving our communities. We appreciate it.
Much appreciated. Speaking for the whole group here, it's our pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. Any member of the public have any questions or comments on this item? Oh, they all look happy back there. Okay. All right. All right. With that, we will conclude item 7, and with our thanks and appreciation as stated. And we move along to item 8, selection of a new vice chair for remainder of 24-25. And it's our typical custom here to rotate between Davis and Woodland. So the vice chair is a Woodland representative, and David and I have conferred, and he's agreed that I could continue as vice chair. So could I have a motion to that effect, please?
I'll motion that.
I don't know, Tom.
I have to second my own motion.
I'll second.
All right. Motions and second that I take over vice chair for Rich Landsberg, who stepped off this board. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. No comment from the public. And then the long-range board calendar. We've been talking about that throughout the meeting, actually.
Yes. So our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on April 17 in Davis. A couple of things we'll have on the agenda. We'll have the budget preview for the next fiscal year. And then 2 other things, considering the agreement for the Drought Protection Act with the Bureau of Reclamation. And then another thing that will be on the agenda is, assuming we get it done in time, we should get it done in time, we have to amend our operating agreement with RD 2035 at the Joint Intake Facility with the inclusion of our own separate meter at the intake. What we have been doing is the complicated splitting the power bill every month. That was problematic for both us and WAPA. So we have our own separate power bill now coming. Because of that, we have to admit, the agreement we have currently in place has about 2 pages of how to split the power bill. We have to change that to the new operational system. There are still, I think it's 2 annual fixed charges that we have to split with RD 2035. We don't want to make either party worse off, so it's really just simply a matter of balancing the numbers. And then the other thing is the common facilities, the power bill for the lights and for the screen cleaner itself, the things that we share in common. We have to split. What we're working on right now is to find out whose bill does that end up on. Hopefully we have that worked out in the next week or so. And as soon as we have that, we'll meet with RD 2035 and with our attorneys and hammer out the agreement. We've already met with RD 2035. They're fully agreeable to do this. We have to do it because we have a separate agreement. So essentially we're simplifying the agreement, that instead of splitting about 10 or so charges a month, we're going to split 2 or 3. So it'll be a much simpler agreement, but it's just something we have to do to clean up the fact that we've changed our power supplier.
No questions about the long-range agreement?
No.
Or rather, long-range program. Thank you. So April 17th in Davis at 3 o'clock will be our next meeting. And board member comments. David.
Yeah, I got a comment. I just wanted to thank the staff here. Took a tour of the treatment facility, and it was very impressive. And as you said, Ben, that you could tell that people are passionate about what they're doing, and it was evident in my tour, and so informational. So I just want to say thank you to the staff that were there and made sure that we understood what the acronyms were in the processes, and let us know that we can reach out. Thank you.
I believe that concludes all our business, Madam Clerk. All right. And thanks to our staff, obviously thanks to our contractor. And with that, we're adjourned.